For 50 years, my wife went to the bank every single Monday. Rain or shine, sickness or health, Esther never missed a Monday. She told me she was depositing her tips from housekeeping, just pennies really, saving for a rainy day. I never questioned her. I trusted her with my life. But when she passed away last week, I discovered why she really made those trips. And when I opened that safety deposit box, I did not find pennies. I found a secret that would shatter my world, and then rebuild it into a weapon against the very people trying to destroy me. I am Harold Jenkins, 68 years old, and my hands are rough from 40 years of fixing engines and changing oil. I have spent my life covered in grease so my family could be covered in silk. I thought I had earned a quiet retirement in the house I paid for with my sweat and blood. But as I stood over my wife's open grave, I realized the vultures were already circling. Before I tell you how I lost everything and gained an empire, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you. The rain was falling hard at the cemetery, turning the Georgia red clay into mud. It was a cold rain, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you feel like you will never be warm again. The pastor was reading Psalm 23, Esther's favorite. His voice was deep and soothing, trying to offer some comfort to a broken old man. I stood there, clutching my hat to my chest, staring at the mahogany casket. That was my heart inside that box. That was 50 years of waking up next to the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. I wanted to hear the pastor. I wanted to hear the prayers. But I couldn't hear a thing over the sound of my son-in-law, Brent. Brent stood 10 feet away, under a massive black umbrella that he was holding over himself, leaving my daughter Tasha partially in the rain. He had his phone pressed to his ear. He wasn't whispering. He was using that loud, confident voice he used when he was trying to sell a condo to a yuppie couple from New York. "The zoning permits are approved," he said, loud enough for the morning congregation to hear. "I told you, the equity is there. We just need to clear the existing structure. It is a teardown." I turned my head slowly. My neck felt stiff. I looked at him. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, his blonde hair perfectly gelled, even in the humidity. He caught my eye, and instead of hanging up, he just tapped his watch and rolled his eyes, as if burying my wife was an inconvenience to his schedule. He pointed at the grave, and then made a wrapping it up motion with his hand. I looked at Tasha, my little girl. She was 35 now, but she still looked like the child I used to carry on my shoulders. She was looking down at her shoes, refusing to meet my gaze. She heard him. She heard him talking business over her mother's body, and she said nothing. That silence hurt more than the noise. The ride home was quiet, not the peaceful quiet of reflection, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a storm about to break. I drove my old Ford truck. They drove behind me in their white Range Rover. When we pulled into the driveway of the house on Elm Street, the house Esther and I bought in 1980, I felt a wave of exhaustion hit me. I just wanted to sit in her rocking chair. I wanted to smell her perfume on the pillows. I wanted to grieve. But Brent didn't give me time to take off my coat. We walked into the kitchen. This kitchen was the heart of our home. This was where Esther kneaded dough for her famous yeast rolls. The table was a solid oak piece I had sanded and stained myself 30 years ago. It still had the marks where Tasha had pressed too hard with her crayons when she was 6. Brent walked in and slammed his leather briefcase onto that table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. He didn't ask how I was doing. He didn't offer a glass of water. He clicked the latches open and pulled out a large roll of paper. He spread it out, covering the spot where Esther used to sit. It was a blueprint. "Okay, Harold, we need to have a serious talk about optimization," Brent said, clapping his hands together. I stared at him. Optimization. My wife was not even cold in the ground, and he was talking about optimization. I moved to the counter and filled the kettle with water. I needed something to do with my hands, because if I didn't hold on to something, I was afraid I might wrap them around his throat. I lit the stove. The click of the burner was the only sound for a moment. "What are you talking about, Brent?" I asked, my voice low and gravelly. "Look, let us be realists here," Brent said, leaning over the table, his knuckles white. "This house is a drain. It is old. The plumbing is from the Stone Age. The insulation is non-existent. It is an asset that is depreciating daily. Tasha and I have been crunching the numbers." He pointed to a brochure he had tossed next to the blueprints. It had a picture of a sterile, gray building with a few sad-looking trees out front. "Sunny Acres Assisted Living," he announced, as if he were gifting me a vacation to Hawaii. "We found a great spot for you. It is efficient, small footprint, medical staff on site. It is a massive upgrade from this drafty old place. Plus, it frees up capital." I watched the steam start to rise from the kettle. I looked at Tasha. She was standing by the refrigerator, picking at her fingernails. "Tasha," I said, "you want to put me in a home? Today?" She looked up, her eyes red, but her jaw set tight. "It is not like that, Daddy. It is just... Brent says the market is peaking. We have some liquidity issues with his new development downtown. We need to unlock the value of this property to bridge the gap. It is just business. Business." The word hung in the air, smelling of rot. I poured the water into my mug. I didn't put a tea bag in. I just held the hot ceramic, letting the heat burn my palm. It grounded me. "I am not going anywhere," I said. I sat down at the head of the table, right next to his blueprints. I took a sip of the hot water. "This is my house. I paid the mortgage for 30 years. I raised you in this house, Tasha. Your mother's spirit is in these walls. I am staying right here." Brent let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the sound of a wolf that had stopped pretending to be a dog. He straightened up and buttoned his suit jacket. The fake smile vanished. His face went cold and hard. He reached into his briefcase again and pulled out a legal document. He slid it across the table toward me. It slid over the blueprints and stopped right next to my hand. "Actually, Harold, that is where you are confused," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "You don't own this house." I looked at the paper. It was a deed transfer, dated 10 years ago. It had Esther's signature on it. "Mom signed the house over to me a decade ago," Tasha said, her voice shaking slightly. "To avoid inheritance tax. She wanted to make sure it stayed in the family." "Technically," Brent interrupted, leaning in close to my face, creating an invasion of space that made my skin crawl. "Technically, you are a guest here, a tenant at will, and as the legal owners, we have decided to repurpose the asset." He tapped the table with his index finger. Tap, tap, tap. "We are not asking you, Harold. We are telling you. The financing for my project is contingent on the equity from this lot. I have already scheduled the demolition crew for a site assessment." "Demolition," I whispered. "You are going to tear it down?" "It is a double lot, Harold," Brent said, checking his watch again. "We can fit 4 luxury townhomes on this parcel. Gentrification is coming to this neighborhood whether you like it or not. We are just riding the wave." I looked at the scratches on the table, the crayon marks, the dents from family dinners, the history. He saw dollar signs. I saw my life. "You can't do this," I said, looking at Tasha. "Tell him, Tasha. Tell him he can't throw your father out on the street the day after your mother's funeral." Tasha looked at Brent. Then she looked at the floor. "I am sorry, Daddy," she whispered. "We are in too deep. We need the money." Brent grabbed the blueprints and rolled them up. The snap of the rubber band sounded like a judge's gavel. "You have 24 hours, Harold," he said, walking toward the door without looking back. "Pack your personal effects. Anything left behind after tomorrow morning belongs to the contractors. They are coming at 8 a.m. to measure for the bulldozers." He walked out. The front door slammed. Tasha lingered for a second, looking like she wanted to say something, maybe apologize, maybe hug me. But then Brent honked the horn from the driveway. She flinched, turned, and ran after him. I sat there alone in the darkening kitchen. The silence rushed back in, but this time it wasn't empty. It was heavy with betrayal. I looked at the spot where Esther used to sit. I felt a tear run down my cheek, getting lost in my gray beard. They thought I was just a broken-down old mechanic. They thought I was powerless. They thought they could erase 50 years of history for a quick payout. I stood up. My knees popped, but I stood tall. I walked over to the calendar on the wall. Tomorrow was Monday, Esther's day. I didn't start packing. I didn't look for boxes. I walked to the bedroom and pulled my old suitcase out from under the bed. But I wasn't packing clothes. I reached all the way to the back of the closet, under a pile of old sweaters, where I found a shoebox wrapped in duct tape. I had found it yesterday while looking for her favorite scarf to bury her with. I hadn't opened it then, but I was going to open it now. I sat on the edge of the bed and peeled back the tape. Inside, there was no money, There were just 50 small, leather-bound notebooks, one for each year. I opened the most recent one. The handwriting was shaky, but familiar. August 14th. Went to First Liberty Bank. Deposit $40. Meeting with Mr. Blackwood. He says the seed has grown into a forest. Mr. Blackwood. The name meant nothing to me, but the look in Brent's eyes today meant everything. He wanted a war? He wanted to talk about assets and equity? I closed the notebook. I looked at the clock. I had 12 hours until the contractors arrived, but I only needed until 9 a.m. when the bank opened. My wife went to the bank every Monday for 50 years. Tomorrow, for the first time in my life, I was going to go with her. And I had a feeling that whatever was in that bank was going to cost Brent a lot more than a luxury townhouse. The sun had barely risen over the Georgia pines when the invasion began. I did not even get the chance to finish my first cup of coffee. The liquid was still hot in my mug when the front door burst open without a knock. It wasn't thieves. It was worse. It was a crew of 5 men in dusty work boots and neon vests, carrying sledgehammers and drills. They did not wipe their feet. I watched a pair of size 12 boots stomp mud directly onto the rose-patterned rug Esther had bought for our 20th anniversary. That mud felt like a boot on my neck. Brent marched in behind them, like a general commanding an army of destruction. He was barking orders into his headset while pointing at my furniture. "Clear the living room first," he shouted. "We need to rip up this carpet by noon to check the subfloor." I stood up, my knees protesting the sudden movement. "What is going on?" I asked, my voice getting lost in the sudden roar of a power drill. Brent did not look at me. He just waved a hand in my direction as if shooing away a fly. "We are expediting the process, Harold," he said, finally looking up from his clipboard. "The contractors had an opening in their schedule. We can't waste time. You are moving downstairs." Downstairs. He meant the basement. It was a finished basement, technically, but it was damp, cold, and smelled of mildew and old paint. It was where I stored my tools and the Christmas decorations. It was not a place for a human being to live. "This is my home," I said, stepping in front of a worker who was reaching for Esther's china cabinet. "You cannot just throw me in the cellar like an old lawnmower." "Temporary housing," Brent corrected me with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Just until the paperwork for the nursing home clears. Think of it as a transition period. Besides, you will be out of the way of the dust. It is for your own health." He snapped his fingers at 2 of the largest workers. "Help Mr. Jenkins with his personal effects. Move the bed from the master suite to the basement. Everything else goes in the dumpster or into storage." I watched helplessly as they dismantled my life. They were not careful. They tossed my books into boxes like they were garbage. They dragged my armchair across the hardwood floor, leaving deep scratches that screamed in agony. Every scrape was a fresh wound on my heart. I tried to protest, but the noise was deafening. The sound of ripping carpet, the whine of saws, the shouting of men who didn't care that they were destroying 40 years of memories. I felt small. I felt invisible. For the first time in my life, I felt truly old. I retreated to the bedroom, the master suite that I had shared with Esther. It was the last sanctuary left, but the enemy was at the gates. I knew I had only minutes before they came for this room too. I frantically began pulling things out of the drawers. I needed to save her. Not her body, that was gone, but her essence, her hairbrush, her reading glasses, the Bible she read every night. I dropped to my knees to check under the bed. It was dark and dusty. My hand brushed against something hard and cardboard. I frowned. We never stored anything under the bed except for maybe a stray slipper. I reached further back, my shoulders straining against the frame, my fingers hooked around a corner. I pulled. It was a shoebox, an old, battered shoebox from a pair of boots I must have bought in the 90s. But it was heavy, and it was wrapped in layers of silver duct tape, sealing it shut like a fortress. I sat back on my heels, coughing in the dust that was dancing in the morning light. Why would Esther tape up an empty shoebox? I looked at the door. I could hear the heavy footsteps coming down the hall. They were coming for the bed. I grabbed the letter opener from the nightstand and sliced through the tape. The sound was a sharp rip in the quiet room. I pulled the lid off. I expected to find old photos, maybe letters from her sister in Alabama, maybe even cash, but there was no money. Instead, there were notebooks, dozens of them. Small, black, leather-bound pocket notebooks, the kind you buy at the drugstore for $1. I picked one up. The leather was worn smooth, telling me it had been handled thousands of times. I opened it to the first page, 1974. The handwriting was neat, slanted, and unmistakably Esther's. January 7th, First Liberty Bank, deposit $20, meeting with Mr. Blackwood. He says patience is a bitter plant, but it bears sweet fruit. I frowned. $20? I flipped the page. January 14th, First Liberty Bank, deposit $15. Mr. Blackwood advises on the copper futures. I flipped through the book, every single Monday, for 50 years. The amounts were always small, $20, $30. Sometimes, on a good week when she got a Christmas bonus from the family she cleaned for, it was $50. I did the math in my head. Even over 50 years, $20 a week was not a fortune. It was maybe $50,000. A nice safety net, sure, but nothing that explained the secrecy. Nothing that explained why she wrapped this box like it contained the nuclear codes. And who was Mr. Blackwood? I knew Esther cleaned houses for some wealthy folks in Buckhead, but she never mentioned a Blackwood. And why was she taking investment advice? Esther didn't know anything about stocks. She kept her money in a coffee can in the kitchen until she had enough to buy a savings bond. Or so I thought. I picked up the last notebook. The year was current. The last entry was from 2 weeks ago, just days before her heart gave out. Monday, First Liberty Bank, deposit $40. Mr. Blackwood is worried about the wolves. I told him my Harold is a lion. He just does not know it yet. My Harold is a lion. Tears blurred my vision. She believed in me. Even when I was just a grease-stained mechanic, she saw a lion. But right now, sitting on the floor while men destroyed our home, I felt more like a lamb waiting for the slaughter. "Hey!" the voice boomed from the doorway. I jumped, instinctively clutching the box to my chest. Brent was standing there, blocking the light. He looked at me with disgust. "I told you to clear out, Harold. The guys need to move this bed." "What is that?" He walked over, his expensive Italian loafers crunching on the debris his workers had tracked in. He looked down at the box in my arms. "Just some old papers," I muttered, trying to stand up. My knees were stiff, and I stumbled slightly. Brent reached out and snatched the notebook from my hand before I could stop him. He flipped it open, scanning the pages with a sneer. "First Liberty Bank? Deposit $20? He laughed. A short, cruel bark of a laugh. "Oh, this is rich. Mom was hoarding her grocery change. What is this, her secret retirement fund? A couple of $1,000 she skimmed off the grocery budget?" He tossed the notebook back into the box with contempt. "It is pathetic, really," he said, shaking his head. "She probably thought she was being so smart, hiding pennies like a squirrel. You can keep it. Maybe it will pay for your diapers at the nursing home for a week." He reached for the box. "Give me that. I will toss it in with your clothes. You are holding up the demolition crew." "No." The word came out of my mouth before I even thought it. It wasn't loud, but it was hard, like steel. Brent paused, his hand hovering over the box. "Excuse me?" I said no. I stood up. I am 6 feet tall. I might be old, and my back might hurt, but I spent 40 years lifting engine blocks and turning bolts that were rusted shut. My hands are not soft like his. My hands are weapons forged in labor. I gripped the box so hard the cardboard creaked. I looked Brent in the eye. For the first time since the funeral, I didn't look down. I looked right at the arrogance in his face. "You do not touch this," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You do not touch her things, and you do not touch me." Brent blinked. He took a step back, surprised by the sudden aggression. He laughed nervously, trying to regain control. "Okay, relax, old man. Don't give yourself a heart attack. Keep your little box of trash. Just get downstairs." He turned and walked away, yelling at the workers to hurry up. I stood there for a moment, listening to the beat of my own heart. It was slow and steady. The fear was gone, replaced by something cold and sharp. My Harold is a lion. I looked at the box. I looked at the entry about Mr. Blackwood. I walked to the closet. Most of my clothes were already in garbage bags, but I saw my suit hanging in the back. It was navy blue, outdated, and smelled of mothballs. It was the suit I wore to church, the suit I wore to bury my wife. I took off my flannel shirt. I took off my work pants. I dressed slowly, deliberately. I put on the white shirt, buttoning it all the way to the top. I put on the tie. I put on the jacket. It was a little tight across the shoulders, but it made me stand straighter. I walked out into the hallway. Brent was in the kitchen, looking at his phone. He looked up and saw me. He started to laugh. "Where are you going, Harold? To a costume party? You look like a funeral director from the 70s. I walked past him. I didn't stop. I walked past the workers who were tearing down the curtains. I walked to the front door. "I am going to the bank," I said, not turning around. "The bank?" Brent cackled. "What are you going to do? Deposit your Social Security check? Do you want a ride? I don't want you wandering off and getting lost." I opened the door. The fresh air hit my face. "I will find my own way," I said. I walked out to my old Ford truck. I put the shoebox on the passenger seat, strapping it in with the seat belt as if it were a child. I started the engine. It roared to life, a sound I knew better than my own voice. I didn't know who Mr. Blackwood was. I didn't know why Esther had saved $20 a week for 50 years. But I knew one thing. Esther never did anything without a reason. And if she thought I was a lion, it was time I started acting like one. I put the truck in gear and headed toward downtown, towards First Liberty Bank, towards the truth. First Liberty Bank looked less like a financial institution and more like a fortress built to keep people like me out. The building was a massive structure of white marble and imposing stone pillars that stretched high into the Atlanta sky. It sat on the corner of Peachtree Street, radiating an aura of old money and exclusion. My rusty Ford truck, sputtering as I pulled into the parking lot, looked like a blemish on a pristine painting. I parked next to a shiny black Mercedes and a silver Porsche. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage that was still simmering from the morning. I looked at the shoebox buckled into the passenger seat. I took a deep breath, unbuckled it, and tucked it under my arm. I walked toward the revolving glass doors. I caught my reflection. A 68-year-old black man in a suit that was 10 years out of style, the fabric slightly shiny at the elbows, tight across the shoulders. My shoes were polished, but the leather was cracked. I looked exactly like what I was, a retired mechanic trying to look dignified. I pushed through the doors and the blast of air conditioning hit me like a wall of ice. The lobby was silent, save for the soft clicking of expensive heels on marble floors and the low hum of serious conversations. The air smelled of crisp paper and expensive cologne. I walked toward the teller line. There was a young man behind the counter. He could not have been more than 25. He had slicked back hair and a suit that fit him perfectly. He was typing on a computer, but as I approached, his eyes flicked up. He did not smile. He did not offer a greeting. His eyes scanned me from my scuffed shoes to my gray beard, and I saw the judgment settle in his gaze like a heavy stone. He saw a nuisance. He saw someone who was lost. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked. The word sir did not sound respectful. It sounded like a warning. "I am here to make a deposit," I said, my voice steady, "and I need to speak to Mr. Blackwood." The teller let out a short, sharp breath that was almost a laugh. He leaned over the counter, lowering his voice as if he were doing me a favor. "Sir, Mr. Blackwood is the branch president. He does not handle standard checking accounts. If you want to cash a check or make a small deposit, the ATM is right outside. It is very user-friendly." I didn't move. I felt the eyes of the other customers on me. A woman in a Chanel suit clutched her purse a little tighter. A security guard, a large man with a stone face, took a step away from the wall, his hand resting near his belt. "I am not going to the ATM," I said, placing the shoebox on the marble counter. "I have an appointment, or at least my wife did." The teller looked at the beat-up shoebox with disgust. "Sir, I am going to have to ask you to remove that from the counter. This is a bank, not a storage facility. Please use the ATM outside, or I will have to call security to escort you out. You are disturbing the other customers." The security guard was walking toward us now. I could see the muscles in his jaw working. I was 1 second away from being thrown out onto the sidewalk. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. This was how the world saw me. Just an old man in a cheap suit who didn't belong. I opened the shoebox. I pulled out the black notebook. I slammed it down on the marble counter. The sound echoed through the silent lobby. "Her name was Esther Jenkins," I said, my voice rising. "She came here every Monday for 50 years, and she wrote down that she met with Mr. Blackwood. Now you tell him I am here." The teller rolled his eyes and signaled to the guard. "Okay, that is enough. Escort him out." The guard reached for my arm. "Sir, you need to come with me." "Stop!" The voice did not come from the teller. It came from the direction of the private elevators. The doors had just slid open. A man stepped out. He was tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that cost more than my house. He carried himself with an authority that made the air in the room change. This was Mr. Blackwood. He was looking at the counter. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the black notebook. The teller straightened up, looking terrified. "Mr. Blackwood, sir, I am so sorry. This man was just causing a disturbance. I was just sending him to the ATM." Mr. Blackwood ignored him. He walked across the lobby, his strides long and purposeful. He stopped right in front of me. He looked at the notebook, then he looked at me. His eyes were blue and piercing, but there was no judgment in them. There was recognition, and something else. Shock. "You are Harold," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded slowly. "I am." Mr. Blackwood let out a breath he seemed to have been holding. He looked at the guard, who immediately dropped his hand from my arm and stepped back. He looked at the teller, whose face had gone pale. "You tried to send Harold Jenkins to the ATM?" Blackwood asked, his voice dangerously quiet. The teller stammered. I just thought—" "You thought wrong," Blackwood snapped. He turned back to me, and his face softened. He extended a hand. "Mr. Jenkins, please accept my condolences. Esther she was a force of nature. We have been expecting you." He gestured toward the private elevator. "Please, come with me." I picked up the shoebox. I looked at the teller. He was staring at me with his mouth slightly open. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just turned my back on him and followed Mr. Blackwood. We walked past the line of wealthy customers, past the security guard who wouldn't meet my eyes. We stepped into the elevator, and the doors closed, shutting out the noise of the lobby. The silence in the elevator was heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Mr. Blackwood pressed a button on the panel. It wasn't for the top floor. It was for the bottom, the basement. "She spoke of you often," Blackwood said softly as we descended. "She always said you were the strong one, the one who held the family together." I felt a lump in my throat. "I didn't know about that," I said. "I think she was the one holding everything." The elevator doors opened. We weren't in a basement. We were in a vault. The air was cool and smelled of steel and dust. The walls were lined with metal boxes of all sizes. In the center of the room was a heavy steel table with a single lamp. Blackwood walked over to a massive circular door at the far end. It wasn't a small deposit box. It was a private walk-in vault. He keyed in a code and turned a heavy wheel. The gears groaned, a sound deep and ancient. The door swung open. "Mr. Jenkins," Blackwood said, stepping aside, "your wife was not just a depositor. She was our longest-standing private client." I walked inside. I expected to see stacks of cash, maybe the $20 bills she had saved. I was ready to count out a few $1,000s and feel proud of her discipline. But the room was not filled with cash. It was filled with shelves, and on those shelves were rows and rows of thick, color-coded files. There were stacks of bond certificates. There were deeds with gold seals. I walked over to the nearest shelf. I picked up a file. It was labeled Coca-Cola. The date on the stock certificate was 1980. The number of shares was staggering. I picked up another file. IBM. Another. Apple. I turned to Blackwood, my hands trembling. "I don't understand. She was a housekeeper. She made minimum wage." Blackwood smiled, a sad, respectful smile. "Esther was the smartest woman I ever met, Mr. Jenkins. She cleaned the offices of the biggest brokers in the city. She cleaned the boardrooms of the banks. They didn't see her. They treated her like furniture. They talked business in front of her. Mergers, acquisitions, IPOs. They thought she was just emptying the trash." He walked over to a map on the wall. It was a map of the city. There were red pins all over it. "She listened, Harold, and she invested. She put every penny of her tips into the information they gave her for free. She bought land when no one wanted it. She bought stocks when they were pennies." He pointed to the shelves. "This isn't just savings, Harold. This is an empire." I looked at the files. My knees gave out and I had to grab the edge of the steel table to stop from falling. The room spun. All those years, all those times she wore old clothes, all those times she clipped coupons, she was sitting on this. "How much?" I whispered. My voice cracked. "How much is it worth?" Blackwood walked over to the table and opened a ledger. He turned it toward me. I looked at the number at the bottom of the page. I blinked. I looked again. It was a number with too many zeros. It was a number that people like me only saw on the lottery news. She created a trust, Blackwood said. The Iron Rose Trust. She wanted to protect you. She knew your son-in-law was aggressive. She wanted to make sure that when she was gone, no one could take advantage of you. I looked at the number again. I looked at my rough, calloused hands. Hands that had changed oil for 40 years. Hands that were shaking violently now. Mr. Blackwood leaned in. Harold, listen to me. You don't just have enough to retire. You have enough to buy this bank. You have enough to buy the entire neighborhood your son-in-law is trying to kick you out of. I stood up straight. The trembling stopped. A cold clarity washed over me. I thought of Brent. I thought of his blueprints. I thought of the way he looked at me this morning like I was trash to be thrown away. I closed the ledger. I looked at Blackwood. Does he know? I asked. Does Brent know about this? Blackwood shook his head. No one knows. Just you, me, and the IRS. To the world, Esther was just a housekeeper. Good, I said. I felt a fire lighting in my chest. A fire that burned hotter than the shame I felt in the lobby. Keep it that way, Mr. Blackwood. Freeze everything. Don't let a single dime move without my signature. But sir, Blackwood said, confused, you can access this now. You can go home in a limousine. You can fire your son-in-law. No, I said. I looked at the map with the red pins. I saw the pin right over my neighborhood, right over the land Brent was desperate to develop. I am not going home in a limousine. I am going home in my truck. I am going to let him think he won. I am going to let him dig his hole a little deeper. I picked up the shoebox. It felt lighter now. Or maybe I was just stronger. My wife played the long game for 50 years, I said, turning to the door. I think I can play it for a few more weeks. I walked out of the vault. I walked through the lobby. The teller was pretending to be busy on the phone, afraid to look at me. The guard held the door open for me this time. I stepped out into the bright sunlight. I got into my old truck. I looked at the bank one last time. They thought I was a victim. They were about to find out I was the storm. Mr. Blackwood handed me a glass of water because he saw that my hands were shaking so hard I was about to drop the ledger. I took a sip. The water was cold, but it did nothing to cool the fire of confusion burning in my chest. I looked around the vault. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that usually only exists in churches or graveyards. I looked at him and asked the question that had been screaming in my head. How? Just tell me how. She scrubbed floors. She dusted shelves. She made $12 an hour for most of her life. Blackwood smiled, and for the first time, I saw genuine admiration in his eyes. He leaned against the steel table and crossed his arms. Harold, you have to understand the world your wife worked in. She cleaned for the titans of Atlanta, the CEOs, the investment bankers, the men who move markets with a whisper. And do you know what those men do when the cleaning lady walks in? They ignore her, I said. I knew that feeling well. Exactly, Blackwood said. They kept talking. They discussed mergers before they were public. They talked about zoning changes before the city council voted. They talked about companies that were about to crash and companies that were about to soar. To them, Esther was just part of the furniture. They didn't think she was listening. They certainly didn't think she understood. But she did understand. Blackwood walked over to a shelf and pulled down a binder. It was labeled 1982. She would come to me on Mondays, he continued. She would give me her $20, and she would give me a tip she heard while dusting a boardroom table. She would tell me to buy land on the west side because a highway was coming in 5 years. She would tell me to buy stock in a small computer company because the CEO was about to sign a contract with the government. He opened the binder. It was full of receipts, old, yellowing receipts for land purchases that cost pennies back then. She bought the scraps, Harold. She bought the things nobody wanted. Swampland, abandoned warehouses, stocks that were trading for cents. And then she waited. She had the one thing those rich men didn't have. She had patience. She was willing to wait 10, 20, 30 years for a seed to grow. I ran my hand over the leather cover of the binder. It was stamped with a small logo, a rose made of iron. Why iron rose? I asked. Blackwood looked at me. She told me that a real rose dies in the winter, but an iron rose can survive the frost, the heat, and the storm. She said she was building something that could not be killed. I felt tears prick my eyes again. Esther, my gentle, quiet Esther. She had been a warrior in disguise. She had been fighting a war for our future every single day, armed with nothing but a dust cloth and a brilliant mind. She had built a fortress of iron, while I was just trying to keep the roof from leaking. She did it for us. She did it so that one day, we wouldn't have to bow our heads to anyone. I took a deep breath. Okay, so we have money. Blackwood shook his head slowly. No, Harold, you don't just have money, you have leverage. He flipped the ledger to the back section. The tab read, Real Estate Holdings, Long-Term Leases. I started reading the list of addresses. Most of them I didn't recognize. Industrial parks, strip malls, parking lots downtown. But then my finger stopped. It stopped on page 42. The address was 124 Summit Avenue. My heart skipped a beat. Summit Avenue. That was the old textile district. The district that was currently being bulldozed to make way for the biggest luxury development in the city. I looked up at Blackwood. My mouth went dry. The Summit, I whispered. Blackwood nodded. He knew exactly what I was thinking. Your son-in-law, Brent. He is building his flagship project, the Summit, right? He has been on the news talking about it for months. I nodded. He has leveraged everything for it. He put up our house, his house, every dime he could borrow. Blackwood tapped the address in the ledger. Harold, Brent doesn't own the land. The developers in that district don't buy the land because it is too expensive. They lease it. They sign 99-year ground leases. They pay rent to the landowner. I looked back at the page. The owner listed was the Iron Rose Trust. You mean, I said, my voice trembling, you mean Esther owns the land under his project? Blackwood corrected me. No, you own the land under his project. Brent is your tenant. I felt the room spin. The man who had kicked me out of my own kitchen. The man who was throwing away my wife's things. The man who called me a burden. He was building his entire future on my property. And what happens, I asked, feeling a cold calm settle over me. What happens if he doesn't pay his rent? Blackwood turned the page to show me the contract terms. It is a strict commercial lease, Harold. If the tenant misses a payment, or if the tenant violates any terms of the agreement, such as financial insolvency or legal trouble, the landlord has the right to evict. And here is the kicker. If evicted, all improvements on the land become the property of the landlord. I stared at the words. All improvements. That meant the buildings, the steel, the concrete, the glass towers. If he defaults, I said, I get his buildings. Blackwood nodded. Every single brick. I sat back in the heavy leather chair. The magnitude of it hit me like a physical blow. Brent was walking on a tightrope, and he had no idea that I was the one holding the rope. He was treating me like dirt, unaware that I could pull the ground out from under him with a single phone call. But then, the anger faded, replaced by a deep, aching sorrow. Why didn't she tell me? I asked softly. Why did she let me worry about bills? Why did she let me fix cars until my back gave out? Blackwood closed the ledger gently. Because she knew them, Harold. She knew Tasha, and she knew Brent. She knew that if they knew there was money, they would stop working. They would become parasites. She wanted Tasha to learn how to stand on her own feet. She wanted to protect you from their greed. She was afraid that if you knew, you might give in to them because you have a good heart. He was right. Esther was always right. If I had known I had millions, I would have given Tasha whatever she wanted, and Brent would have drained us dry years ago. Esther had hidden the treasure to save our souls. Blackwood reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He slid it across the table. I opened it. Inside was a heavy, old-fashioned iron key. It didn't look like a key to a door. It looked like a key to a kingdom. This is the chairman's key, Blackwood said. It is symbolic, but it is also necessary. As of this moment, you are the sole trustee of the Iron Rose Trust. You have absolute power, Harold. You can sign the eviction notice right now. I have the papers ready. We can shut down his construction site by 5 p.m. today. I looked at the key. It felt cold and heavy in my hand. It weighed a pound, but it felt like a ton. I thought about the way Tasha looked at the floor when Brent kicked me out. I thought about the way she signed that fake medical form. No, I said. I closed the box and put it in my pocket. Blackwood looked surprised. No, not yet, I said. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. If I do it now, they will just say I am a vindictive old man. They won't learn anything. And I need to know something. I need to know if there is anything left of my daughter inside that woman. I walked to the door of the vault. I am going to give them one last chance, I said. I am going to let them think they have won. I want to see how they treat a poor old man who has nothing left to offer them. And if they fail the test? Blackwood asked. I turned back to him. The sadness was gone from my face. My herald is a lion, Esther had written. If they fail, I said, then the iron rose will show them its thorns. I left the vault. I left the bank. I got back into my truck. I wasn't just a mechanic anymore. I was the landlord, and rent was due. I drove home from the bank with the iron key burning a hole in my pocket. The city of Atlanta looked different to me now. The skyscrapers were not just tall buildings anymore. They were piles of assets and liabilities. The construction cranes were not just machines. They were markers of debt. And I was no longer just a retired mechanic driving a rusted Ford. I was the silent partner in half the deals on the street. I was a millionaire. I was the landlord. But as I turned onto Elm Street, I felt the familiar weight of my reality settle back onto my shoulders. To the world outside, I was a tycoon. To the people inside my house, I was a piece of furniture they were trying to throw out. I walked into the kitchen. The air was thick with the smell of seared beef and garlic butter. My stomach rumbled. I had not eaten since breakfast. Brent and Tasha were sitting at the table. They were not eating leftovers. They were eating ribeye steaks. Thick, juicy steaks with a side of asparagus and roasted potatoes. A bottle of expensive red wine was open between them. They stopped talking when I walked in. The silence was instant and cold. Brent did not look up from his plate. He cut a piece of meat, the juice running red onto the white porcelain. He chewed slowly, savoring it. Tasha looked at me, then looked away quickly. There was no third-place setting. There was no steak for me. There is some meatloaf in the fridge from Tuesday, Brent said, taking a sip of wine. You can heat it up in the microwave. We are celebrating closing a big deal. We did not think you would be hungry. I looked at the steak. I could buy the best steakhouse in the city right now. I could buy the cattle ranch that raised the cow. But I said nothing. I walked to the refrigerator. I took out the Tupperware container. It was cold and gray. I put it on a plate and put it in the microwave. The hum of the machine was the only sound in the room. I sat down at the small counter in the corner, my back to them. I ate my cold meatloaf while they feasted. I listened to the clinking of their silverware. I listened to Brent pouring more wine. It was the ultimate disrespect. It was not about the food. It was about the message. You do not matter. You are not one of us. You are a ghost in your own home. I finished my meal and washed my plate. I turned to go downstairs to the basement, to the exile they had forced upon me. But Brent cleared his throat. It was a sound I had come to hate, a sound that meant he was about to do something terrible. "Sit down, Harold," he said. He did not ask, he ordered. I pulled out a chair and sat opposite them. I looked at Tasha. She was trembling. Her hands were gripping her wine glass so hard I thought it might shatter. Her eyes were red and swollen. She had been crying. But it was not tears of grief for her mother. It was tears of guilt. "Tasha has something to give you," Brent said, nudging her with his elbow. "Go on, honey. Give it to him." Tasha reached under the table and pulled out a manila envelope. She slid it across the table. She did not look at me. She looked at the centerpiece of flowers. "What is this?" I asked. My voice was calm, too calm. "It is for your own good, Daddy," Tasha whispered. Her voice was shaking. "We are just so worried about you. You have been acting so strange lately, wandering off to the bank, talking about things that do not make sense. We think Mom dying was too much for you." I opened the envelope. It was a medical assessment. It was signed by a doctor I had never met, a Dr. Phillips. I read the diagnosis: early onset dementia, severe confusion, inability to care for self, recommendation for immediate assisted living placement. I looked up. "Dementia?" I asked. "I fixed an engine yesterday. I drove myself to the bank this morning. I remember the day you were born, Tasha. I remember the day you fell off your bike and I carried you home. I am not confused." Brent leaned forward. His face was fake concern masked over pure malice. "Harold, you went to the bank today and made a scene," he said. "The teller called us. He said you were shouting about being a millionaire. He said you were delusional. We cannot let you hurt yourself. This facility is the best place for you. They have professionals. They can help you with your episodes." I looked at him. He was lying. The teller had been terrified, not concerned, and Blackwood certainly had not called him. This was a setup, a cold, calculated setup. Then I realized why. It was not just about getting me out. It was about tomorrow. You have investors coming tomorrow, do you not? I asked. You have the partners for the summit project coming to sign the final papers, and you need the house empty. You need to show them you have full control of the assets. You cannot have a senile old man living in the basement when you are trying to sell the land out from under him. Brent slams his hand on the table. The wine glass rattled. It does not matter what is happening tomorrow, he snarled. What matters is that you are unfit to be here. This is a medical order, Harold. We can have the state take you if you do not go willingly. But we wanted to do this as a family. We have a car coming in an hour. An hour. They were evicting me in the middle of the night. Like a criminal. I looked at Tasha, my little girl. The girl Esther had loved more than life itself. The girl whose college tuition I had paid for by working double shifts for 4 years. Tasha, I said softly, look at me. She slowly raised her eyes. They were wet with tears. Is this what you want? I asked. Do you really believe I am crazy? Or are you just so afraid of him that you will sell your own father for a signature? Daddy, please, she sobbed. It is just, we need this. We need the money. The project is in trouble. If we do not get the investors tomorrow, we lose everything. Just go for a little while. Once we get back on our feet, we will bring you home. I promise. She was lying. She knew it. I knew it. Once I signed that paper, once I walked out that door, I was never coming back. They would sell the house, demolish it, and put me in a state-run facility to rot. I looked at the pen Brent was holding out to me. It was a gold pen, shiny, expensive, just like him. If I refused, they would call the police. They would show the fake medical report. It would be a scene. I would be dragged out in handcuffs. I would lose my dignity. And more importantly, I would show my hand. If I fought now, they would know I was strong. They would be on guard. Esther had said, be patient. Mr. Blackwood had said, let them dig their hole. I took the pen. The metal was cold in my hand. I looked at the paper. Consent for voluntary admission. You win, Brent, I said. I looked him dead in the eye. You win. I am just a confused old man. I do not want to be a burden. Brent smiled. It was the smile of a predator that had just killed its prey. That is the right choice, Harold. You will love it there. Bingo nights on Thursdays. I signed my name. Harold Jenkins. The loops were strong and clear. I wasn't signing a medical form. In my mind, I was signing his death warrant. I was signing the document that gave him just enough rope to hang himself. I put the pen down. I will go pack my bag, I said. I stood up. I walked to the basement. I did not take much. A few shirts, a photograph of Esther, and the suit I was wearing. I left everything else. The furniture, the clothes, the tools. Let them have it. Let them have the scraps. I walked back upstairs 10 minutes later. A black sedan was waiting in the driveway. Not an ambulance, a private car service. They wanted this discreet. I walked out the front door. The night air was crisp. I stopped on the porch where I had kissed Esther for the first time, the porch where I had rocked Tasha to sleep. Tasha was standing in the doorway, hugging her arms, shivering. Goodbye, Daddy, she whispered. I did not answer her. I walked down the steps. I did not look back at the house. I did not look back at the garden. I got into the car. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror. Where to, sir? He asked. The instructions say Sunny Acres Nursing Home. I waited until we were out of the driveway. I waited until we turned the corner and the house was out of sight. I waited until I knew Brent was popping another bottle of wine to celebrate his victory. I leaned forward. Change of plans, I said. Take me to the Ritz-Carlton downtown. The driver blinked. The hotel, sir? Yes, I said. And step on it. I have a business meeting in the morning. I settled back into the leather seat. I touched the key in my pocket. Brent thought he had cleared the board. He thought the game was over. He had no idea that I had just moved my king into position. The game had just begun, and I was playing for keeps. The black sedan did not turn toward the highway that led to Sunny Acres Nursing Home. Instead, I told the driver to take the exit for Midtown. He looked at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes wide with confusion. Sir, the dispatch order was very specific. I leaned forward, and the leather of the seat creaked under my weight. I am paying you triple the fare in cash. Turn the car around. Money has a way of clearing up confusion very quickly. He took the exit. We pulled up in front of a glass tower that looked like a jagged shard of ice piercing the night sky. This was not a place for the sick or the elderly. This was a place for sharks. I grabbed my battered suitcase and walked into the lobby. The security guard started to move toward me, his hand resting on his belt. But before he could speak, a voice cut through the air like a whip. "Let him through." I looked up. Standing by the elevators was a young man who could not have been older than 30. He was African American, tall and lean, with eyes that burned with a terrifying intelligence. He was wearing a suit that was tailored so sharply it looked like it could draw blood. He did not smile. He did not offer a handshake. He just nodded at me. "Mr. Jenkins, I am Davis. Mr. Blackwood told me you might be coming." I walked over to him. "You are the lawyer. I am the sword," Davis corrected. "Mr. Blackwood is the shield. I am the one you call when you want to draw blood." I liked him immediately. We rode the elevator to the 45th floor. The doors opened to an office that smelled of espresso and aggression. Davis led me to a conference room that had a view of the entire city. He threw a file onto the mahogany table. It landed with a heavy thud. "Sit down, Harold. Can I call you Harold? You can call me whatever you want, as long as you help me destroy him." Davis pulled out a chair and sat opposite me. He opened the file. Inside were pictures of Brent, pictures of his car, pictures of my house, and pages upon pages of bank statements. "I have been tracking your son-in-law for 3 years, Davis said, "ever since your wife Esther instructed me to watch him. She knew he was a snake. She just did not know when he would bite." I looked at the photos. Brent laughing at a gala. Brent shaking hands with a politician. "He thinks he is a king," I said. Davis scoffed. "He is a pauper in a Gucci belt. I hate men like him, Harold. I grew up in a neighborhood just like yours. I watched men like Brent come in with their blueprints and their bulldozers. They buy out the grandmothers. They kick out the veterans. They paint everything gray and charge $3,000 for rent. They act like they are saving the neighborhood, but they are just bleeding it dry." He tapped the file. "But Brent is worse than most. He is not just greedy. He is reckless." I leaned forward. "Tell me." Davis stood up and walked to a whiteboard. He uncapped a red marker. "Beat 2, analyzing the weakness." Davis drew a circle and wrote "The Summit" in the middle of it. "This is his flagship project," Davis explained. 2 luxury towers, retail on the bottom, penthouses on the top. He has pre-sold 40% of the units. On paper, he looks like a genius. He is swimming in debt, Harold. He is drowning. And he is standing on your shoulders, trying to keep his nose above water. Davis sat back down. His eyes were cold. "We can end him right now, Harold. I have the papers drafted. We can file an injunction on the title of your house. We can reveal the Iron Rose Trust as the true owner of the Summit land. We can foreclose on his loans. By tomorrow morning, he will be locked out of his office and facing federal fraud charges." I looked at the file. I looked at the face of the man who had laughed at my wife's funeral. I looked at the man who had fed me leftovers in my own kitchen. It would be fast. It would be brutal. But it would be too easy. "If we stop him now," I said slowly, "he will blame the market. He will blame the bank. He will tell Tasha that it was just bad luck. He will play the victim. He will say he almost made it." Davis raised an eyebrow. "So what do you want to do?" "I want him to believe he has won," I said. "I want him. It is yours for as long as you need it." He handed me a key card. And Harold, Davis said, looking at my frayed cuffs, "If you are going to be the chairman, you need to look like the chairman. Brent judges books by their covers. If you want to scare him, you need to change the cover." Beat 3, the transformation. The St. Regis was a fortress of limestone and luxury. The doorman looked at my truck with suspicion until I flashed the black card Davis had given me. Then the doors swung open like magic. The penthouse was silent. It was vast. The floors were marble, and the ceilings were high enough to fly a kite. It was cold. It lacked the warmth of my little house on Elm Street. There was no smell of yeast rolls, no sound of Esther humming, but it smelled like power, and right now, power was what I needed. I walked into the bathroom. It was bigger than my entire living room. I looked in the mirror. I saw a tired old man. I saw gray stubble on my chin. I saw hair that was unkempt. I saw a shirt that was stained with engine oil and grief. I saw the man Brent had thrown away. I picked up the phone. I called the concierge. "I need a barber," I said, "and I need a tailor. Send them up, tonight. The concierge hesitated. Sir, it is 11 p.m., I said, tonight. 40 minutes later, I was sitting in a leather chair in the center of the living room. A barber with tattoos on his arms was dragging a straight razor across my throat. The hot towel felt like it was melting away the years of grime. I watched the gray clumps of beard fall to the floor. When he was done, I looked younger. The lines in my face were still there, but they looked like etched stone, not cracked mud. The tailor arrived next. He measured my shoulders. He measured my inseam. He clucked his tongue at my posture until I stood up straight. He brought out a suit. It was not off the rack. It was a charcoal gray three-piece suit made of Italian wool. Davis had sent it over from his own emergency wardrobe. It fit a little loose in the waist, but the tailor pinned it tight. I put on the white shirt. It was crisp and stiff. I tied the silk tie. I put on the jacket. I walked back to the mirror. The mechanic was gone. The victim was gone. The man staring back at me looked dangerous. He looked like a man who owned the building, not the man who fixed the boiler. I walked out to the balcony. The wind whipped at my jacket, but I did not feel the cold. I looked down at the city of Atlanta. It was a sea of lights. I looked toward the west, toward Elm Street. I could not see my house from here, but I could see the glow of the construction lights, where Brent was working on the summit. I imagined him there, drinking his wine, high-fiving his partners, laughing about the old man he had shipped off to the nursing home. Laugh while you can, son, I whispered to the wind. I gripped the railing. My hands were strong. My resolve was iron. You wanted my house, Brent. You wanted my land. You wanted a report. He had erased 50 years of my life with a 30-second soundbite. Tasha was standing next to him in a silver dress. She looked pale. When he said those words, she flinched, just a little. But I saw it. She knew it was a lie. But she stood there and smiled her frozen smile, because that is what wives of tycoons do. Brent raised his glass. To the summit, he bellowed. To the new skyline of Atlanta. The crowd cheered. They clapped for the man who had stolen a house from an old mechanic. They clapped for the thief. I took a sip of my water. Clap while you can, Brent, because the man walking toward you right now is not coming to celebrate. He is coming to collect. On the screen, I saw a black limousine pull up to the edge of the red carpet. The door opened. Davis stepped out. He did not look like a lawyer tonight. He looked like money. Old money. Dangerous money. He wore a navy suit that fit him like armor. He walked past the security guards who parted for him like the Red Sea. He walked straight up to the stage. Brent looked down confused. He did not recognize Davis. He just saw a man who looked wealthier than anyone else in the room. Can I help you? Brent asked into the microphone. Davis didn't need a microphone. His voice projected with the authority of a man who owned the room. My name is Mr. Sterling, representing the International Sovereign Investment Group. We have been watching your project, Mr. Thompson. We are impressed by your ambition, but we think you are thinking too small. The crowd went silent. Brent's eyes widened. Greed flickered in them, instantly replacing the confusion. Too small? Brent asked, stepping down from the stage. Davis gestured to the empty lot behind the construction zone. Why build one tower when the market demands two? My partners are looking for a place to park significant capital. We are authorized to offer an immediate injection of $10 million to expand the summit into a twin-tower complex. $10 million? I saw. We need to know you are fully committed. Brent looked at Tasha. Then he looked at the reporters. Then he looked at the check Davis was holding. He didn't see the trap. He didn't see the noose. He only saw the gold. Of course, Brent said, puffing out his chest. I believe in this project with my life. I am happy to pledge everything. Tasha stepped forward. She grabbed Brent's arm. Her fingers dug into his expensive suit jacket. Brent, wait, she whispered. Her voice was picked up by the boom mic hovering nearby. I could hear the fear in it. Honey, not now, Brent hissed, trying to shake her off. Brent, this is too fast, Tasha said urgently. We are already leveraged to the hilt. If we pledge the house and the accounts and something goes wrong, we will be on the street. We will lose everything. Daddy's house, our house, everything. Brent turned on her. His face turned ugly. The mask of the charming developer slipped for a second. Stop acting like your father, he snapped. This is what the clause that stated the investor reserves the right to recall the full capital amount immediately if the borrower is found to be in violation of any moral or legal codes, including but not limited to fraud, elder abuse, or financial insolvency. He didn't read it. He scribbled his signature with a flourish. Brent Thompson. He handed the pen back to Davis. "Done," Brent said, beaming. Davis took the document. He didn't smile. He looked at Brent with the cold, dead eyes of a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. "Welcome to the partnership," Davis said. I turned off the TV. The room went black. I sat there in the darkness of the penthouse, listening to the silence. He signed. He had just handed me the keys to his life. He had pledged my house, my land, and his own freedom to a company that I owned. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked at the city lights. "Enjoy the champagne, Brent," I whispered. "It is the last expensive drink you are ever going to have." There were climbing roses that hugged the trellis I had built for our 10th anniversary. It was a riot of color in a gray world. It was where we drank our coffee. It was where we made up after arguments. It was where she told me she was pregnant with Tasha. Brent stood on the patio. He was wearing a hard hat that looked ridiculous with his Italian suit. He waved his hand forward, signaling the driver to proceed. "Tear it all up," I heard him say through the microphone on the camera. "We need a flat surface for the VIP parking lot. I want this dirt compacted by noon." The bulldozer roared. The metal bucket slammed into the earth. I watched as 40 years of love were uprooted in 4 seconds. The trellis snapped like a toothpick. The red petals were crushed into the mud. The roots were torn from the soil, exposing the raw earth underneath. I felt a physical pain in my chest, sharp and cold. I did not cry. Tears are for grief, and I was done grieving. This was not sadness. This one was from the main construction site of the summit. It was a hive of activity. Cranes were swinging, cement trucks were churning, and hundreds of men were shouting. Then, the foreman's phone rang. I watched through the high-definition lens of the site camera. I saw the foreman, a burly man named Miller, answer the call. I saw his face go pale. He shouted something back, waving his arms. He hung up and sprinted toward the trailer where Brent had his temporary office. Inside that trailer, Brent was pouring himself a mid-morning scotch. He felt like a king. He had just signed the deal with the Sovereign Investment Group. He thought he had $10 million sitting in his account. His phone rang. It was the CFO of his company. "Brent, we have a problem," the voice on the other end said. It was loud enough for me to hear through the bug Davis had planted in the office. "What problem?" Brent asked, annoyed. "I am busy. The transfer from Sovereign," the CFO stammered. It is the name of the flower he had just crushed. Outside the trailer, the noise was changing. It wasn't the sound of work anymore. It was the sound of anger. The cement trucks were turning off their mixers. The crane operators were climbing down from their cabs. Foreman Miller burst into the trailer. "Boss, we have a situation," Miller yelled. "The concrete guys are leaving. They are dumping the load in the street, and the union rep is here. He says the payroll check bounced this morning. The men are walking off the job." Brent looked out the window. His empire was crumbling in real time. Hundreds of workers were gathering around the gate. They were not working. They were chanting, "Pay us, pay us, pay us." Brent ran his hand through his hair. He looked terrified. He looked at his phone. He looked at the contract he had signed last night. "It is just a glitch," he muttered. "It has to be a banking glitch." He grabbed his jacket and ran out of the trailer. He tried to address the crowd. "Listen to me," he screamed over the noise. "It is a technical error. The money is coming. I just signed a $10 million deal. Go back to work." A worker threw a hard hat at him. It hit the dirt near his expensive shoes. "We don't eat promises, Brent," someone yelled. "No pay, no work." Within 30 minutes, the site was silent. The cranes were still. The trucks were gone. The only thing moving was Brent, pacing back and forth in his trailer, frantically dialing numbers that went straight to voicemail. I sat in my penthouse, sipping tea. The silence on the construction site was music to my ears. He was learning the first lesson of business. You can treat people like dirt, but you cannot treat money like dirt. And right now, the money was on strike. Desperation is a powerful drug. It makes smart men stupid, and stupid men reckless. Brent was not a smart man. He was a greedy man, and greed had blinded him to the trap closing around his neck. By 3 p.m, Brent realized the bank was not going to unfreeze his accounts today. The compliance review would take 48 hours, but he needed $200,000 in cash by 5 p.m. to keep the crew from walking off the job permanently and to stop the suppliers from suing him. He could have called Tasha. He could have told her the truth. He could have admitted he was overextended. But his ego was too big. He wanted to be the hero. He wanted to be the man who fixed it. So he made the call I knew he would make. Davis had anticipated this. We knew Brent had a gambling problem in his 20s. We knew he had contacts in the underworld. I watched the GPS tracker on his car move. He left the construction site. He drove past the shiny glass towers of downtown. He drove into the industrial district, to a warehouse that looked abandoned, but was actually the office of a man named Silas. Silas was a loan shark. He was not a bank. He did not care about credit scores. He cared about collateral and kneecaps. I listened to the audio from the bug in Brent's jacket. "I need 200 grand, Brent said. His voice was breathless. "Just for a week. I have 10 million coming in. It is just stuck in a wire transfer." Silas laughed. It was a dry, scratching sound. "I know who you are, Thompson. I saw you on the news. Big shot developer. Why are you coming to me for pocket change?" "Cash flow issue," Brent lied. "Just bridge capital." Silas paused. The silence was heavy. "It will cost you," Silas said. 20% interest, compounding weekly, and I need a personal guarantee." "Anything," Brent said too quickly. "I will pay you back double next week." "I need a lien on your car," Silas said, "and a lien on that property you were bragging about, the one on Elm Street." Brent hesitated. He had already pledged that house to the Sovereign Group. Pledging it twice was fraud. It was a felony. It was a prison sentence wrapped in a handshake. But he looked at his watch. It was 4 p.m. He was running out of time. "Fine," Brent said. "Draw it up." I heard the scratch of a pen on paper. I heard the thud of a heavy bag of cash being placed on a table. Brent walked out of that warehouse with a bag of money and a death sentence. He thought he had bought himself a lifeline. He didn't realize he had just dug the hole so deep that not even a ladder could save him. He drove back to the construction site. He paid the foreman in cash. He paid the union rep. He bought himself one more day of silence. He sat in his trailer, wiping sweat from his forehead, thinking he had survived the storm. I watched him from my penthouse. I touched the iron key in my pocket. "You didn't survive, son," I whispered. "You just took the bait." Phase 1 was complete. He was cut off from legitimate money. He was in bed with criminals. And he had committed fraud that I could prove with a single recording. Tomorrow, I would pull the string tight. Tomorrow, the iron rose would show its thorns, and Brent would realize that bleeding is not the worst thing that can happen to a man. Being erased is. Desperation has a distinct smell. It smells like stale coffee and cold sweat. It smells like a man who knows the clock is ticking louder than his heartbeat. On Tuesday morning, Brent reeked of it. He had 24 hours to pay back the $200,000 he had borrowed from Silas, the loan shark. The interest was compounding daily, and Silas had made it very clear that he did not accept excuses. He only accepted cash. I watched the final act of this tragedy from the comfort of my leather chair in the St. Regis. Davis had tapped into the security feed of the title company where Brent was heading. It was a small office in a strip mall, the kind of place that asked few questions as long as the check cleared. Brent was selling my house. He had found a buyer overnight, a man named Mr. Gecko. I called him that because he looked like a lizard in a cheap suit. He was a cash buyer, a flipper, the kind of man who circled distressed properties like a vulture, waiting for an animal to die. Brent had listed the house for half its value. He was practically giving it away. He did not care about the loss. He just needed the cash to pay Silas and keep his legs broken. I watched Brent sitting in the waiting room. He was shaking his leg nervously. He kept checking his phone. Every time it buzzed, he flinched, thinking it was Silas coming to collect. Mr. Gecko sat opposite him, looking bored. He knew he was getting a steal. He was going to buy my home, my sanctuary, and turn it into a rental property or flip it for a quick profit. "Just sign the papers," Brent muttered to himself. "Just sign the papers and get the check." He looked at the clock on the wall. It was 10 a.m. He had 7 hours until the deadline. The title officer called them back. She was a middle-aged woman with glasses and a tired expression. She led them into a small conference room with fluorescent lights that hummed loudly. "We are ready to close, Mr. Thompson," the woman said. "We just need to run the final title check and verify the funds." Brent smiled. It was a tight, painful smile. "Great. Let us get this done. I have a meeting at noon. He was lying. He did not have a meeting. He had a drop-off. Mr. Gecko pulled a cashier check from his jacket. Here it is, 300,000, cash, as agreed. Brent stared at the check. It was his salvation. It was his lifeline. He reached for a pen. I leaned forward in my chair. Not so fast, son, I whispered. The title officer typed something into her computer. She frowned. She hit the enter key again, harder this time. She adjusted her glasses. Is there a problem? Brent asked. His voice cracked slightly. The room went silent. The only sound was the humming of the lights and the frantic typing of the woman. Mr. Thompson, the woman said slowly. When did you acquire full power of attorney for the owner, Mr. Harold Jenkins? Last week, Brent said quickly. He is incapacitated. He is in a facility. I have full authority to sell. It is all in the file. The woman stopped typing. She looked up at Brent. Her face was not tired anymore. It was serious. I cannot proceed with this transaction, sir. What do you mean you cannot proceed? Brent stood up. The buyer is right here. The money is right here. Print the deed. The system has flagged the property, the woman said. A lis pendens was filed this morning. A what? Brent shouted. A notice of pending legal action, she explained. The title is frozen. The buyer, Mr. Gecko narrowed his eyes. He put his hand over the check. What kind of legal action? The woman turned the screen so they could see. It is a lawsuit filed by the Iron Rose Trust on behalf of Mr. Harold Jenkins. It alleges elder abuse fraud and coercion regarding the signing of the power of attorney documents. It also alleges that the transfer of the property to your wife 10 years ago violated the terms of the original deed, which granted Mr. Jenkins a life estate. Brent went pale. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. That is a lie, he screamed. My father-in-law is senile. He does not even know what day it is. Who filed this? The woman looked at the document. It was filed by the law firm of Davis and Sterling, and it is accompanied by a sworn affidavit from Mr. Jenkins himself, stating that he was forced to sign admission papers under duress. Mr. Gecko stood up. He snatched the check off the table. I am out, he said. Wait, Brent pleaded, grabbing the man's sleeve. It is a mistake. I can fix this. Just give me an hour. I will call my lawyer. Mr. Gecko shoved him away. I do not touch properties with fraud allegations. Do not call me again, Thompson. He walked out. The door slammed shut. Brent was left standing alone in the room with the title officer. She looked at him with suspicion now. I think you should leave, Mr. Thompson, she said, reaching for the phone, before I call the authorities. Brent ran. He did not walk. He ran out of that office like the building was on fire. I watched him go. I took a sip of my coffee. Strike one. Brent sat in his car in the parking lot. His hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. He was hyperventilating. He had no house. He had no buyer. And he had no money for Silas. He pulled out his phone. He dialed Tasha. Pick up, pick up, pick up, he screamed at the phone. Tasha answered on the fourth ring. Her voice was small and timid. Hello, who did you talk to? Brent roared. What? Tasha asked, confused. Who did you talk to about your father? Brent screamed. Did you call a lawyer? Did you talk to one of your friends? No, Brent, I have not talked to anyone, Tasha cried. What is happening? Someone filed a lawsuit, Brent yelled, hitting the dashboard with his fist. Someone blocked the sale of the house. They know about the nursing home, Tasha. They know about the papers. They are accusing us of fraud. Tasha gasped. Oh my God. Is it the police? It is worse, Brent said. It is a trust fund. Some group called Iron Rose. Who are they? Did your mother have rich friends? No, Tasha sobbed. Mom was a maid. She did not know anyone. Brent looked around the parking lot. He felt eyes on him. He felt paranoid. Someone is sabotaging me, he hissed. It is a competitor. It has to be. Someone wants the summit to fail. They found out about your dad and they are using him as a weapon. He never once suspected me. In his mind, I was just a pawn. I was a confused old man drooling in a cafeteria somewhere. He could not conceive that the hand holding the knife was mine. What do we do, Brent? Tasha asked. I do not know, Brent whispered. The anger drained out of him, replaced by cold terror. His phone beeped, a text message. He looked at it. It was from an unknown number. It was just 3 emojis, a clock, a skull, and a $sign. It was Silas. Brent dropped the phone as if it were burning hot. "I have to go," he told Tasha. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To find money," he said. "Anywhere." He hung up. I watched him start the car. He peeled out of the parking lot, nearly hitting a minivan. He was driving blind. He was driving reckless. He was a rat in a maze, and I had just closed off the only exit. I turned to Davis, who was sitting across from me, working on his laptop. "He is running," I said. Davis nodded without looking up. "Let him run. He will only get tired." "What is the next move?" I asked. Davis turned the screen toward me. "The next move is the summit," he said. "He defaulted on the ground lease payment this morning. He used the money to pay the union instead of the rent." I smiled. It was a cold, hard smile. "So we own the buildings?" I asked. Davis nodded. "Technically, yes, but we need to make it official. I have arranged a meeting with the city inspector. We are going to shut down his site, not because of money, but because of safety." "Safety?" I asked. Davis smirked. "When you build fast and cheap, you cut corners. I have evidence that the steel he used for the foundation is subpar. It does not meet code." "And where did you get that evidence?" I asked. Davis pointed to the file labeled Iron Rose Suppliers. "Because we sold it to him," Davis said. "Or rather, a shell company we own sold it to him. It is perfectly safe, but on paper it lacks the proper certification. It will take weeks to test it. Weeks he does not have." I leaned back in my chair. "You are a dangerous man, Davis." "I learn from the best," Davis said, looking at the photo of Esther on my desk. Brent was driving around the city begging for money. Tasha was at home crying. And I was about to condemn the only thing Brent loved more than himself, his tower. The phone rang. It was Brent. He was calling me. I looked at the ID, Harold Jenkins. He was calling the man he put in a home. He was desperate. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. I picked up. "Hello?" I said, making my voice sound weak and shaky. "Harold," Brent said. His voice was frantic. "Harold, are you okay?" "Who is this?" I asked, feigning confusion. "It is Brent, your son-in-law. Listen, Harold, I need you to sign something for me. The doctors say you are doing better. I can come pick you up. We can go to a lawyer. I just need you to tell them that you wanted to sell the house." I paused. I let the silence stretch. "I like it here, Brent," I said softly. "They have bingo on Thursdays." "No, Harold, listen to me," Brent shouted. "You have to help me. People are trying to hurt me, Harold. They are trying to take everything." I looked at the view of the city. I looked at the iron key on the table. "That sounds terrible, Brent," I said, "but I am just a confused old man. I probably would not understand. Harold, please." I hung up. I turned off the phone. I looked at Davis. "He is ready," I said. "For what?" Davis asked. "For the knockout." I stood up and walked to the closet. I pulled out my suit jacket. "Tomorrow is Monday," I said, "and on Mondays we do business." I was not just fighting for a house anymore. I was fighting for every person who had ever been underestimated, for every parent who had been discarded, for every worker whose hands were dirty so their children's hands could be clean. Brent wanted a war. He wanted to play games with people's lives. Well, he was about to learn that when you play with fire, you do not just get burned. You turn to ash. And I was the one holding the match. Wednesday morning did not bring the sun. It brought a gray, heavy sky that hung low over the city of Atlanta. It looked like the lid of a coffin closing down on the world. I stood on my balcony at the St. Regis, watching the wind whip through the streets. I was drinking black coffee. No sugar, no cream. Just the bitter taste of reality. Down on the street level, things were quiet at the Summit construction site. The workers were gone. The cranes were still. The only movement was the flapping of a torn plastic sheet on a stack of drywall. But the silence was about to be broken. I watched through the high-definition camera feed on my tablet as a black sedan pulled up to the gate of the construction site. It was not a luxury car. It was a utilitarian vehicle, the kind driven by people who deliver bad news for a living. A man in a cheap suit got out. He held a thick envelope in his hand. He walked past the empty guard booth. He walked over the muddy tracks where the bulldozers had been. He walked straight to the trailer where Brent was hiding. Brent had slept in the trailer. I knew this because I had watched the lights stay on all night. He was afraid to go home. He was afraid to face Tasha. and he was definitely afraid to face Silas the loan shark. I saw Brent open the door of the trailer. He looked terrible. His shirt was wrinkled. His hair was a mess. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 10 hours. The process server handed him the envelope. He did not say a word. He just handed it over, turned around, and walked away. I knew exactly what was in that envelope. I had spent 3 hours drafting it with Davis the night before. It was a notice of default and immediate termination of ground lease. I watched Brent tear open the envelope. His hands were shaking so hard he almost dropped the papers in the mud. He started to read. I imagined the words echoing in his head. "Dear Mr. Thompson, please be advised that your company is in material breach of the ground lease agreement dated 1982 regarding the property at 124 Summit Avenue. The breach was specific. It was undeniable. Clause 14, Section B, states that the tenant must maintain the structural integrity of the land and surrounding vegetation. The unauthorized excavation and destruction of the established botanical garden, specifically the Heritage Rose Garden, constitutes a willful destruction of property." I took a sip of my coffee. "You dug up her roses, Brent. You thought they were just flowers. You thought they were just dirt. But in the eyes of the law, you were destroying the assets of the landlord." But that was just the jab. The uppercut was coming in the next paragraph. Furthermore, the failure to remit the monthly lease payment for the current month constitutes a financial default. Under the terms of the agreement, the landlord hereby exercises its right to terminate the lease, effective immediately. I watched Brent stumble back against the metal wall of the trailer. He was reading the second page now, the page that Davis called the kill switch. This was the part where the trap snapped shut. When you build a building on land you do not own, you are taking a risk. You are betting that you will always be able to pay the rent, because if you do not, the law is very clear. The land is the king. The building is just a subject. I could see Brent mouthing the words as he read. Pursuant to Clause 21, upon termination of this lease due to tenant default, all improvements constructed upon the land, including but not limited to structural foundations, steel frameworks, and stored materials, shall immediately revert to the sole ownership of the landlord. I set my coffee cup down. It made a sharp clink against the saucer. Revert to ownership. It meant I owned it all. I owned the steel he had bought with borrowed money. I owned the concrete he had poured. I owned the glass windows that were waiting to be installed. Brent dropped the papers. They scattered in the wind, blowing across the mud. He fell to his knees. It was a theatrical gesture, but it was real. He was screaming. I could not hear him through the camera, but I knew what he was saying. He was saying no. He was realized that he had spent millions of dollars building a tower for me. He scrambled to pick up his phone. He was calling his lawyer. He was calling the bank. But there was no one to call, because the second part of the trap had just triggered. At that exact moment across town, in the sleek offices of the Sovereign Investment Group, Davis was pressing the send button on an email. The email was addressed to Brent Thompson. Subject: immediate recall of capital. The $10 million loan that Brent had signed for at the party. The loan he thought was his salvation. It had a clause, too. It said that the loan was contingent on Brent holding a valid lease for the land. No lease means no collateral. No collateral means the loan is in default. I watched Brent phone buzz. He looked at it. He read the email. He threw the phone against the side of the trailer. It shattered. The $10 million was gone. It had never really been there. It was a mirage I had created to make him feel safe enough to pledge his life away. He had nothing. He had lost the land. He had lost the building. He had lost the financing. And he still owed Silas $200,000 by 5 o'clock today. I stood up and walked to the closet. I put on my jacket. It was time to go to the office. Not my old garage. My new office. The one that overlooked the ruin of my son-in-law. The collapse of a man is a slow and ugly thing to watch. It is not like a building falling down. It is like a tire leaking air. At first you do not notice it. Then it gets soft. Then it is flat. Then the rim grinds against the pavement, sparks flying until everything stops. By noon, Brent was grinding on the pavement. He had left the trailer. He had driven his expensive car back to the suburbs, back to the house he had stolen from me. But he did not go inside. He sat in the driveway. I had access to the security cameras at the house too. I saw Tasha come out to the car. She was wearing a bathrobe. Her hair was unwashed. She looked like she had been crying for days. She knocked on the window. Brent did not open the door. He was staring straight ahead, gripping the steering wheel. Then I saw the other car arrive. It was a black SUV with tinted windows. It pulled up right behind Brent, blocking him in. Two men got out. They were not wearing suits. They were wearing leather jackets. One of them was big. The kind of big that comes from lifting heavy weights in a prison yard. The other one was thin and wiry, holding a baseball bat loosely at his side. These were Silas men. Tasha screamed. I saw her mouth open in a silent wail of terror. She banged on the window, trying to get Brent to move, trying to get him to run. But Brent could not move. He was paralyzed by the consequences of his own greed. The big man walked up to the driver's side window. He tapped on the glass. It was a gentle tap, almost polite. Brent rolled down the window an inch. I could not hear what they said, but I saw the exchange. The big man leaned in. He whispered something. He pointed to the house. He pointed to Tasha. Brent shook his head violently. He was begging. He was pleading. He was crying. The big man reached into his jacket and pulled out a piece of paper. He pressed it against the glass. It was the lien on the house. The lien Brent had signed with Silas. The man with the bat walked over to the mailbox. He took a swing. The wooden post shattered. The mailbox flew into the street. It was a warning. Next time it would not be the mailbox. The men got back in their SUV and reversed slowly. They did not leave. They parked at the end of the street. They were watching. They were waiting. The deadline was 5 p.m. Brent got out of the car. He fell onto the grass. He was sobbing uncontrollably. Tasha ran to him. She tried to hold him, but he pushed her away. He stood up and yelled at her. He pointed at the house and screamed. He blamed her. He blamed her mother. He blamed me. Then Tasha did the only thing she had left to do. She pulled out her phone. My phone rang in the penthouse. Incoming call. Tasha. I looked at the screen. I looked at the picture of her that popped up. It was a photo from her college graduation. She looked so happy, so innocent. Before she met Brent, before she forgot who she was, my finger hovered over the answer button. I wanted to answer. I wanted to tell her it was going to be okay. I wanted to be her father. But Esther's voice was in my head. My herald is a lion. Lions do not save the prey from the consequences of their choices. Lions teach the cubs how to survive. And Tasha needed to learn how to survive without me. She needed to see Brent for what he really was, without my money acting as a cushion. I let it ring. 1 ring. 2 rings. 3 rings. I imagined her panic. I imagined her realizing that the safety net was gone, that the father she had tried to institutionalize was now her only hope, and he was not there. The ringing stopped. Voicemail. A minute later, the notification popped up. Voicemail from Tasha. I pressed play. "Daddy," she sobbed. Her voice was broken, breathless. "Daddy, please pick up. We are in trouble. Bad men are outside. Brent says we lost everything. He says the house is gone. Daddy, I am scared. I am so sorry for what we did. Please, Daddy. If you are there, please help us." I listened to it again. Then I deleted it. I walked to the window. The sun was trying to break through the clouds, but it was too weak. "You are not sorry, Tasha," I whispered to the empty room. "You were just scared. There is a difference." I checked the time. It was 2 p.m. I had 3 hours before Silas came back. I had 3 hours to prepare for the final meeting. I called Davis. "Get the car ready," I said. "Are we going to save him?" Davis asked. "No," I said. "We are going to buy him out, but the price is going to be very different than what he expects." I hung up. I touched the iron key in my pocket. It was time to close the deal. It was time to show Brent Thompson that the old man he threw away was the only man who could save his life. And the cost of that salvation was going to be everything he had left. The clock on the wall of my penthouse read 3:30 in the afternoon. I had been watching the digital numbers flip for the last hour. Each minute that passed was a minute closer to the deadline Silas had given my son-in-law. At 5 o'clock, Brent would learn the hard way that loan sharks do not offer grace periods. But I was not going to let Silas break Brent's legs. That would be too easy. I wanted to break his spirit. I nodded to Davis. He picked up his phone and dialed. I could hear the ringtone echo in the silent room. Brent picked up on the first ring. He sounded like a man who was drowning and had just found a straw. "Hello, is this the bank?" "This is Mr. Sterling, representing the Iron Rose Trust," Davis said. His voice was calm, professional, and utterly devoid of mercy. "Mr. Sterling," Brent gasped. Please, you have to help me. There has been a mistake. The lease, the loan. I can explain everything. I just need a little more time." "The chairman is aware of your situation, Mr. Thompson," Davis interrupted. "He is aware that you have lost your financing. He is aware that you have lost your land. And he is aware of your outstanding obligation to certain unregulated lenders." There was a silence on the line, the kind of silence where hope fights with terror. "How do you know about that?" Brent whispered. "The chairman knows everything," Davis said. "He is willing to offer you a path to survival. He is willing to negotiate a buyout of your position, but it must happen now. You and your wife need to be at the headquarters of First Liberty Bank in 20 minutes. Top floor. Do not be late. 20 minutes. Brent stammered. "I can be there in 10. Thank you. Oh God, thank you." He hung up. He thought he had been saved. He thought some benevolent billionaire was about to write him a check and pat him on the head. He had no idea he was driving to his own execution. I stood up. I walked to the mirror and adjusted my tie. It was a silk tie, deep red like the roses Esther used to grow. "Let us go," I said to Davis. "The chairman should not keep his guests waiting." We took the private elevator down to the garage and drove the 3 blocks to First Liberty Bank. The security guards knew me now. They saluted as I walked past. I took the express elevator to the boardroom. It was a room designed to intimidate. The table was 20 feet long, made of polished mahogany. The windows offered a panoramic view of the city, including the stalled construction site of the summit. I sat in the chair at the head of the table. It was a high-backed leather chair that faced the window. When I sat in it, my back was to the door. I wanted them to see the city before they saw me. I wanted them to see the empire they tried to steal. Davis stood by the door like a sentinel. 4 o'clock arrived. The heavy double doors opened. I heard the footsteps. Brent's steps were hurried, frantic. Tasha's steps were slow, dragging. "Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson," Davis said. "Please come in." I heard them stop. They were looking at the room. They were looking at the view. They were looking at the back of my chair. "Thank you for seeing us," Brent said. His voice was shaking. "I cannot tell you how much we appreciate this. We have had a terrible misunderstanding with the lease. I am a reputable developer. My wife here can vouch for my character." Tasha said nothing. I could hear her breathing. It was shallow and ragged. "Please sit down," Davis said. I heard the scrape of chairs. They sat at the far end of the table. So Brent started, his voice pitching higher with nerves. "Mr. Sterling, you mentioned a buyout. I am willing to be reasonable. The summit is a billion-dollar idea. If the trust wants to come in as a partner, I am willing to offer a controlling stake for, say, $5 million. That would cover my immediate liabilities." He was still trying to hustle. He was sitting in the ruins of his life, with a loan shark breathing down his neck, and he was still trying to sell the dream. "The chairman is not interested in a partnership," Davis said. "He is interested in an acquisition, total, complete, and unconditional." Brent hesitated. "Well, I suppose if the price is right. Who is the chairman anyway? I would like to shake his hand. It is rare to meet a man with such vision." I decided it was time. I pressed the button on the armrest. The mechanism hummed softly. The leather chair began to turn, slowly, deliberately. I watched the reflection in the window as I spun. I saw the city slide away. I saw the room come into view. I saw them. Brent looked like a man who had not slept in a week. His suit was rumpled. His eyes were bloodshot. Tasha was wearing a tracksuit, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked small, defeated. The chair locked into place facing them. I rested my elbows on the armrests and steepled my fingers. I looked Brent dead in the eye. "Hello, Brent." The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy. It sucked the air out of the room. Brent blinked. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He blinked again as if his brain was refusing to process the image in front of his eyes. Tasha let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. She covered her mouth with both hands. Her eyes went wide, staring at my suit, staring at my face, staring at the man she thought was locked away in a nursing home. Harold Brent whispered, finally. His voice was barely audible. What are you doing here?" I did not smile. I did not frown. I just stared at him with the cold indifference of a mountain looking at a storm. "I am the chairman," I said. "No," Brent laughed nervously. It was a high, hysterical sound. "No, that is impossible. You are You are confused. You are in Sunny Acres. Who let you out? Where is the real chairman? I stood up. I moved slowly. I buttoned my jacket. I walked down the length of the long mahogany table. My footsteps on the plush carpet were the only sound in the room. I stopped right next to him. I leaned down close enough to smell the stale alcohol and fear on him. You like to talk about optimization, Brent, I said, keeping my voice low and steady. You stood in my kitchen and told me my life needed to be optimized. You told me my house was an underperforming asset. Brent pushed his chair back, trying to get away from me. Harold, listen. I don't know what is going on, but sit down, I commanded. The voice was not the voice of Harold the mechanic. It was the voice of the man who owned the building. Brent froze. He sat back down. You wanted to optimize assets. I continued walking around the table to stand behind Tasha. Well, congratulations, son. You succeeded. You optimized yourself right out of the equation. I looked at Tasha. She was trembling violently. She could not look at me. Daddy, she whispered. I ignored her. I walked back to the head of the table. I picked up the object that was sitting there. It was the black shoebox. The tape was cut, but it was still battered and old. I pulled out the black notebook, the one Brent had tried to throw in the trash. I threw it down the length of the table. It slid across the polished wood, stopping inches from Brent's hand. Open it, I said. Brent looked at the book. He looked at me. His hands were shaking so bad he could barely grasp the cover. He opened it, read the last entry, I said. Brent looked at the page. He squinted. Monday, he read, his voice trembling. First Liberty Bank. Deposit $40. Mr. Blackwood is worried about the wolves. I told him my Harold is a lion. He stopped reading. He looked up at me. The realization was hitting him like a physical blow. The pieces were falling into place. The bank, the trust, the land, the name Iron Rose. Your mother-in-law was not a maid, Brent, I said. She was a visionary. While you were playing with blocks, she was buying the city. While you were talking about being a big shot, she was the one signing the checks that built the skyline. I pointed to the window, to the view of the summit. She bought that land 40 years ago, I said. She bought it for pennies because she knew one day someone like you would come along. Someone greedy, someone blind. I walked back to my chair and sat down. You thought you were a king, Brent. You thought you were playing chess. But you were never playing chess. You were just a pawn on my wife board, and she took you off the board 10 years ago, before you even knew the game had started. Brent dropped the notebook. He looked at Tasha. Did you know he accused her? Did you know about this? I did not know, Tasha sobbed, shaking her head. I swear, Brent, I did not know. Of course she did not know, I said. Esther knew that if Tasha knew about the money, she would become exactly what she is now. Weak, dependent, and married to a parasite. I leaned forward. Now let us talk about your situation. It is 4:20 p.m. You owe Silas $200,000 by 5 o'clock. Brent went white. How do you? I told you. I know everything. I own the debt collection agency that Silas works for. Or rather, I own the company that owns the company that employs him. This was a lie, of course. I did not own Silas. But Brent did not know that. And right now, fear was my greatest weapon. I can make the call, I said. I can tell Silas to stand down. I can pay off your debt. I can save your legs and your life. Brent fell to his knees. He crawled toward me. He actually crawled. Harold, please. I am sorry. I was stressed. I did not mean to hurt you. I love Tasha. We are family. Please help me. I looked down at him with disgust. Stand up, I said. You look pathetic. He stood up, wiping tears from his face. I will help you, I said. But not because we are family. You ceased to be my family the day you threw my wife's belongings in a dumpster. I will help you because I do not want your blood staining my sidewalk. I signaled to Davis. Davis slid a folder across the table. This is the deal, I said. Brent grabbed the folder. He opened it. It is a transfer of assets. You sign over your company. You sign over your car. You sign over everything you own to the Iron Rose Trust. In exchange, we pay off Silas, and we give you a check for $5,000. $5,000, Brent cried. That is nothing. The car alone is worth $80,000. It is $5,000 more than you will have when Silas is done with you, I said coldly. And it is enough to buy a bus ticket to anywhere but here. Brent looked at Tasha. Honey, Tell him. We cannot leave with nothing. I looked at Tasha. He is not leaving with nothing, I corrected. He is leaving with you. Or at least that is his plan. I looked at my daughter. This was the test, the final test. Tasha, I said softly, you have a choice. You can go with him. You can take the bus and start over with the man who tried to put your father in an asylum. Or you can stay. Tasha looked at Brent. She looked at the man who had screamed at her in the driveway, the man who had blamed her, the man who was currently selling their future for $5,000. Then she looked at me. She looked at the father who had carried her on his shoulders. Brent grabbed her hand. Tasha, tell him. We are a team. Tasha pulled her hand away. She stood up. She walked over to the window and looked out at the city. She did not say a word. Brent looked at her. Then he looked at the clock. 4:30. He grabbed the pen. Where do I sign? He asked, his voice dead. He signed the papers. He took the check. He did not look at Tasha again. He walked out of the room, broken, defeated, and alone. I watched the door close. I looked at my daughter. She was crying, silently, staring at the view. I did not go to her yet. I let her cry. She needed to mourn the life she thought she had, so she could begin to build the life she deserved. I turned my chair back to the window. Esther, I whispered. The garden is clear. The weeds are gone. Now we can start planting again. The silence in the boardroom was heavy enough to crush a man. Brent had signed over his company. He had signed over his car. He had signed over the assets he stole from me. But we were not done. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 4:35. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the mahogany table. Brent looked at the door. He thought he was free. He thought he could just walk out of here and disappear. I cleared my throat. The sound made him jump in his chair. Sit down, Brent, I said. We have finished the business transaction. Now we have to deal with the criminal one. Brent sank back into the leather chair. His face was gray. Tasha was staring at her hands, which were folded tightly in her lap. She looked like a ghost. I signaled to Davis. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out 2 thick manila envelopes. He placed them on the table in front of me. They hit the wood with a heavy thud. I placed my hand on the first envelope. In this file, I said, keeping my voice low and even, is a comprehensive report compiled by my forensic accountants and private investigators. It contains the audio recording of you coercing me to sign the nursing home admission papers. It contains the wire transfer records of you paying a bribe to the city zoning official. It contains the loan documents you forged with my signature. And it contains the affidavit from Mr. Gecko stating you tried to sell a property under fraudulent pretenses. I slid the envelope toward him. Brent began to weep. It was a pathetic sound. He put his head in his hands and rocked back and forth. I placed my hand on the second envelope. In this file, I continued, is a different kind of document. It is a petition for uncontested divorce. It is a restraining order barring you from coming within 500 feet of Tasha or myself. And it is a voluntary agreement to leave the state of Georgia permanently. I slid this envelope next to the first one. Here is your choice, Brent. You can leave this room in handcuffs, or you can leave this room single and exiled. Brent looked up. His eyes darted between the 2 envelopes. He looked at the prison file. Then he looked at the divorce file. Tasha lifted her head. She looked at her husband. She was waiting for him to fight. She was waiting for him to say that he would rather go to jail than lose her. She was waiting for the man she had defied her father for. Brent did not look at her. He did not hesitate. He did not ask for a moment to think. He reached for the second envelope. I will sign it, he said. His voice was breathless. I will sign the divorce papers. Just let me go. Tasha made a sound that I will never forget. It was a gasp that sounded like something inside her chest had snapped. Brent, she whispered. Brent ignored her. He ripped open the envelope. He pulled out the papers. He grabbed the pen from the table. He was moving fast. He was terrified that I might change my mind. Baby, please, Tasha said, her voice rising. You cannot just leave me. You said we were partners. You said you loved me. Brent stopped writing for a second. He looked at Tasha, but there was no love in his eyes. There was only the cold, hard instinct of a trapped animal. Tasha, grow up, he snapped. Look at this room. Look at your father. He is one. If I go to jail, I die. I am not going to prison for you. I am not going to prison for anyone. He went back to signing. He signed page 1. He signed page 2. He signed away 10 years of marriage in 10 seconds. Tasha stood up. She was shaking. She walked over to him. She grabbed his shoulder. "I gave up everything for you," she screamed. "I kicked my own father out of his house for you. I lied for you. I stole for you. And you were just going to sign me away like a bad contract." Brent shrugged her off. He did not even look up. "It was a bad contract, Tasha," he muttered. "It was the worst investment I ever made." He finished the last signature. He pushed the papers toward Davis. "There," he said, panting. "It is done. I signed it. Now give me the check. Give me the $5,000. Davis checked the signatures. He nodded to me. I pulled a check from my pocket. I slid it across the table. "Get out," I said. Brent grabbed the check. He stood up. He did not look at Tasha. He did not look at me. He ran for the door. He ran like the devil himself was chasing him. The heavy door slammed shut. The silence rushed back into the room. But this time, it was different. It was the silence of a truth revealed. Tasha stood in the middle of the room. She was staring at the closed door. Her hands were trembling. Tears were streaming down her face, but she was not making a sound. She had stripped her life down to the foundation for that man, and when the storm came, he had abandoned the house without a second thought. I watched her. My heart broke for her. I wanted to run to her. I wanted to hold her like I did when she was 5 years old and scraped her knee. I wanted to tell her that Daddy was here, and Daddy would fix it. But I stayed in my chair. A lion does not lick the wounds of the cub until the cub learns why it got bitten. Tasha turned slowly. She looked at me. Her eyes were hollow. "He never loved me," she whispered. I did not answer. The truth was obvious. "He only loved what you could give him, Tasha," I said softly. "He loved the house. He loved the land. He loved the safety net. When I took the net away, he fell, and he did not try to catch you on the way down." Tasha walked over to the table. She pulled out a chair and sat down. She looked exhausted. "I am sorry, Daddy," she said. Her voice was weak. "I am so sorry. You were right. Mom was right. I was so stupid." She put her head on the table. "Can we go home now?" she asked. "I just want to go home. I want to sleep in my old room. I want to forget this ever happened." I looked at her. This was the moment. This was the hardest thing I had ever had to do. It would be so easy to say yes. It would be so easy to take her back to Elm Street, to let her live in her old room, to feed her and clothe her, and let my millions protect her from the world. But if I did that, she would never change. She would just wait for the next Brent. She would remain a child in a woman body. Esther had left me a task. She had told me to be strong. "No, Tasha," I said. Tasha lifted her head. She looked confused. "What?" I said no, I repeated. "You cannot go home." But you have the house back," Tasha stammered. "Brent signed it over. It is yours." "Yes," I said. "It is mine. It belongs to the Iron Rose Trust. And the trust has strict rules about who lives there." I stood up and walked to the window. "You chose him, Tasha. You chose to evict me. You chose to sign that medical form declaring me incompetent. You made a series of adult decisions, and now you have to live with the adult consequences." Tasha stood up. She looked terrified. "Daddy, you cannot be serious. I have nowhere to go. He took the car. He emptied our joint account before he left. I have no money. I have no job. I have nothing." I turned to face her. "You have your health," I said. "You have your education. You have 2 hands and a brain. That is more than your mother had when she started." I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a small notepad. I wrote down an address. I tore the page out and placed it on the table. "This is a women's shelter on the west side," I said. "It is clean. It is safe. They will give you a bed and a hot meal for 3 nights. Tasha stared at the paper. She looked at me with horror. "A shelter," she gasped. "You are a millionaire. You own this bank. And you are sending your daughter to a homeless shelter." "I am sending my daughter to reality," I said. My voice was hard, but my eyes were wet. I continued. "After 3 days, you will need a job." I spoke to the manager of the grocery store on 4th Street, the one where we used to shop. "He needs a cashier, minimum wage, long hours on your feet. It is hard work." Tasha backed away. "I cannot work at a grocery store," she said. "I have a degree in art history." "Your degree did not stop you from signing fraudulent documents," I said. I walked over to her. "Listen to me, Tasha. I love you. I love you enough to let you fall. If I pick you up now, you will never learn how to stand. I am not going to give you money. I am not going to give you a car. I am not going to give you a house." I pointed to the door. "You are going to walk out that door. You are going to go to that shelter. You are going to get that job. You are going to save your own money. You are going to rent your own apartment, even if it is a studio with a leaky faucet. And when you do that, I said, my voice cracking slightly, when you pay your own electric bill with money you earned from sweating all day, then you come see me. Then we can talk about family, because then you will know what family is worth. Tasha looked at me. She was crying harder now. It was a cry of desperation. You are cruel, she sobbed. Mom would never do this. Mom is the one who told me to do this, I said. I picked up the black notebook. She wrote it right here. Tasha needs to find her own iron. You cannot give it to her, Harold. She has to forge it in the fire. I handed her the paper with the address. Take it, I said, or do not. It is your choice. But the door to Elm Street is locked, and I am the only one with the key. Tasha looked at the paper. She looked at the door where Brent had run. She looked at the luxury of the boardroom. She realized then that the bank account was closed. The daddy bank was closed. She reached out with a trembling hand and took the paper. She wiped her eyes. She stood up straighter. I hate you, she whispered. I know, I said. That is okay. You can hate me. As long as you respect yourself. She turned around. She walked to the door. She did not look back. I watched her leave. I watched the elevator doors close on my only child. I felt like my heart was being ripped out of my chest. I wanted to chase her. I wanted to give her a credit card. I wanted to save her. Davis walked over to me. He placed a hand on my shoulder. That was the bravest thing I have ever seen, he said. I sank into the chair. I buried my face in my hands. It was not brave, Davis, I whispered. It was necessary. I looked out the window at the construction site. It was dark now. The skeleton of the tower stood against the night sky. We tore it down, I said. We tore it all down. Davis nodded. Yes, Harold. But now the foundation is clear. Now you can build something that will actually stand. I touched the iron key in my pocket. Esther, I thought. I hope you are right. I hope she finds her iron, because I do not know how much iron I have left. I stood up. Take me home, Davis, I said. Take me to Elm Street. I have a garden to replant. The soil in Georgia is red like clay and stubborn as a mule. It fights you when you try to dig into it. It resists the shovel. It demands sweat before it gives you life. For the last 12 months, I have spent every morning on my knees in the dirt fighting this soil. And I have won. I stood on my back porch sipping coffee from the mug Esther gave me for our 30th anniversary. The morning air was cool and smelled of damp earth and blooming petals. Where the bulldozer had once ripped a scar across the land, there was now a sea of red. I had replanted the roses, every single bush. I found the original receipts in Esther's notebooks, and I tracked down the exact species she loved. The climbing Don Juan, the Mr. Lincoln, the Veteran's Honor. They were back, and they were stronger than before. The house was quiet, but it was not the lonely silence of a tomb anymore. It was the peaceful silence of a sanctuary. I had repaired the roof. I had sanded the floors. I had painted the walls a soft yellow, the color Esther always said caught the morning light best. I did not hire a crew. I did not bring in a team of strangers. I did it myself. My hands, which had been clean and soft during my time in the penthouse, were rough again. They were stained with paint and scratched by thorns. They felt like honest hands again. I walked down the steps into the garden. I touched the velvet petal of a rose that had just opened this morning. It was a deep crimson, almost black, in the center. It had survived the winter frost, and now it was thriving. People think that once you get rich, you stop working. They think money buys you the right to be lazy. But Esther taught me that money just buys you the right to choose your work. And I chose this. I chose to rebuild what greed had tried to destroy. I chose to honor the memory of the woman who saved my life by tending to the things she loved. I sat on the new bench I had built under the oak tree. I watched a cardinal land on the bird feeder. Life had returned to Elm Street. The birds were back. The squirrels were back. The neighbors waved when they walked by. They did not see a millionaire. They just saw Harold, the man who had the best garden in the neighborhood. And that was exactly how I wanted it. But while my garden was growing in the sunlight, there were others who were living in the shadows. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a report that Davis had sent me yesterday. I did not need to read it. I had memorized it. Brent Thompson was no longer a developer. He was no longer a visionary. He was a ghost. The report said he was living in a small town in Nevada, 2,000 miles away from Atlanta. He was working as a dishwasher in a 24-hour diner off the highway. He lived in a motel room that rented by the week. He paid in cash. He did not have a bank account. He did not have a phone in his own name. He moved every 3 months, terrified that his past would catch up with him. He was right to be afraid. Silas the loan shark had a long memory. Even though I had paid off the principal debt, I had let Silas know that Brent had tried to run. In the world of shadow lending, running is a sin that is never fully forgiven. So Brent spent his days scrubbing grease off plates and his nights looking over his shoulder, waiting for a black SUV to pull into the parking lot. I felt no pity for him. He had chosen his path. He had chosen gold over loyalty, and now he had neither. He was living in a prison of his own making, a prison without bars but with walls made of fear. I folded the report and put it away. I did not like thinking about Brent. I preferred to think about the person who had stayed. I looked at my watch. It was 7 a.m. Tasha would be opening the bakery right now. I got in my truck, not a limousine, my old Ford. I drove to the west side of the city, to a small bakery that smelled of yeast and cinnamon. I parked across the street and watched. Tasha was there unlocking the front door. She looked different. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by jeans and an apron covered in flour. Her hair was not styled in a salon. It was pulled back in a practical ponytail. She looked tired. There were dark circles under her eyes. But she also looked strong. I watched her greet her staff. She did not bark orders like Brent used to. She smiled. She asked them about their families. She lifted the heavy trays of dough herself. She was the first one in and the last one out. She had lived in the shelter for 3 days. She had cried every night. But on the 4th day, she got a job. She rented a small studio apartment above a laundromat. It was noisy and hot, but it was hers. She paid her own rent. She bought her own food. I got out of the truck and walked across the street. The bell above the door chimed. Tasha looked up from the register. When she saw me, her face lit up. It was a genuine smile, not the fake smile she used to wear at Brent's parties. "Hi, Daddy," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "You are early. The cinnamon rolls are still hot." "I will take 2, I said, "and a black coffee." I reached for my wallet. "Put that away," Tasha said firmly. "Your money is no good here, Harold Jenkins. This is on the house." I looked at her. I saw the pride in her eyes. She did not want my money. She wanted to treat me. She wanted to show me that she could provide for her father. "Thank you," I said, putting my wallet away. We sat at a small table by the window. We did not talk about the past. We did not talk about the millions in the bank. We talked about the yeast rising. We talked about the price of sugar. We talked about the rain forecast for the weekend. She was not rich. She was struggling. But she was real. She had found her iron. "I am proud of you, Tasha," I said as I finished my coffee. She looked down at the table, fighting back tears. "I am proud of myself," she whispered. I stood up and kissed her on the forehead. She smelled like bread and hard work. It was the best smell in the world. I walked back to my truck. I had one more stop to make. It was Monday. I drove to First Liberty Bank. The guards opened the heavy glass doors for me. They did not stop me. They nodded with respect. "Good morning, Mr. Chairman," they said. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button for the private vault. Mr. Blackwood was waiting for me. He looked older, but his eyes were still sharp. "The board is assembled, Harold," he said. "The scholarship committee is ready for your approval." I walked into the conference room. A dozen people in suits stood up. I sat at the head of the table. "We are not here to talk about profits today," I said. "We are here to talk about the future." I opened the file in front of me. It was the charter for the Esther Jenkins Iron Rose Scholarship Fund. "This year," I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room, "we are giving full-ride scholarships to 50 students, not just any students. We are looking for the children of housekeepers, the children of janitors, the children of mechanics, the ones who are invisible to the world, but who see everything." I looked around the room. "We are going to give them the tools to build their own empires," I said. "We are going to teach them that patience is power. And we are going to teach them that no matter how much dirt is on their hands, their minds can be clean and sharp." I signed the authorization, $50 million. It was a lot of money, but it was an investment in justice. I left the bank at noon. The sun was high in the sky. I drove back to Elm Street. I walked into my study. I sat at my desk. On the desk there was a small object. It was a single rose, forged from black iron. I had commissioned a blacksmith to make it for me. It was heavy. It was cold. It was unbreakable. I picked it up. People say that revenge is sweet. They say you should crush your enemies and watch them fall. I have done that. I watched Brent fall, and I felt nothing but pity. The real victory is not in the destruction of others. It is in the construction of yourself. Brent is hiding in the dark, afraid of his own shadow. I am sitting in the light, surrounded by roses. My daughter has found her soul. My wife, Legacy, is changing lives. And I am still here. I rubbed the petals of the iron rose with my thumb. "You were right, Esther," I whispered. The winter came, the storm blew, but the roots held. I looked out the window at the garden. A butterfly landed on a red bloom. I am not just a survivor anymore. I am the gardener, and the harvest is finally here. I placed the iron rose back on the desk. I closed my eyes and listened to the peace. My name is Harold Jenkins, and this is my house. We often confuse net worth with self-worth. Brent thought a big building made him a big man, but he crumbled because his foundation was made of greed. Esther taught me that true power is quiet. It is the discipline to save pennies when no one is watching, and the courage to stand alone when the world tries to erase you. Tasha had to lose everything to find herself, and that was the greatest gift I could give her. Never let anyone treat you like a liability in your own life. You are not a burden. You are the architect of your own destiny. If you are breathing, it is not too late to plant a new garden. If Harold and Esther's journey inspired you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories about justice and redemption. Share this with someone who needs to remember their own strength today. Let me know in the comments what you would have done in my shoes. Until next time.